So I was watching Kawhi Leonard play yesterday, and he was magnificent, as he should be, right? Here's a guy who's a two-time Finals MVP, the defending Finals MVP. And, yeah, I mean, I guess we can make a story of the Marcus Morris flagrant foul, which caused him to get ejected. But I prefer to sit there and tell you that Kawhi Leonard, 33 points, 14 rebounds, 7 assists. Remember, he's the guy who was criticized because he's not nearly the passer of LeBron or of Harden or of Luka. His assist numbers have always been down, and now you give him the basketball and you say, hey, go make a play. Guess what? He has, in fact, improved as a passer. What's not seen in these stats is he's a tremendous defensive player. He's versatile. He's good on the ball. He's good in the low post. He's got good big hands, obviously, long arms, gets his hands on basketballs. Like he kind of has a game that doesn't have many flaws, if any flaws, and he's in the prime of his career. And I would say that it stands to reason because of the time off due to quarantine, he might be in the best shape physically he's been in a couple years. So if we start with the premise that, in truth, Kawhi Leonard's the best player in the NBA, and you're like, whoa, wait a second, Gottlieb. Whoa. You were on this show and you said LeBron should be the MVP. He probably won't because Giannis will be the MVP. How can you now flip it and just get all caught up in hyperbole and say Kawhi Leonard's the best player? Well, the best player isn't necessarily the MVP. The MVP is the guy who has the best season, and his team reflects that season. Right? That would probably has the greatest impact on his team during the regular season. That's the regular season MVP. And the reason I like LeBron is not just because of what he's accomplished, but the way in which he's led, what he's gotten out of his teammates. They're the best defensive team in the Western Conference. They're the best record in the Western Conference. And while he may not be at the peak of his career, turning around an entire franchise, much because of his play and his leadership, I would go LeBron. People will go Giannis because they had the best record and he's had an unbelievable year. But if you said in one game, who would you want to have most on your team? My answer is Kawhi Leonard at this point, based upon how old LeBron is right now. And I find it hard for many people to argue with me because he plays both ends. He's become an efficient three-point shooter. He's a better free throw shooter than LeBron. He's a better post scorer than LeBron. And the flaw in his game in comparison to LeBron is he's not the passer of LeBron. That's true. That's fine. But it's not like he doesn't pass, and he does everything else, by my estimation, better than LeBron. At this point, maybe not in totality at peak LeBron, but we're not at peak LeBron. Nobody would argue that. But I was thinking about this. History has a tendency to repeat itself. Right? Those of us who study history know that we study it so that we don't make the same mistakes, yet people do make the same mistakes more than once. Famously, Hitler made the same mistakes as Napoleon. Right? Attacked Russia in the winter, fought a war on two fronts, and lost. There should be a lesson there, but apparently they didn't learn it. We continue to repeat ourselves in terms of government, the things that we do, or in our country, in terms of our social issues. Yes, we've gotten far better than we used to be, but there still are some fallbacks that we go back to. And we're like, man, we've actually seen this before. And the NBA is just like that. I don't know how much longer LeBron James plays. If you compare this age to Jordan's age, Jordan was still the best player in the league, but he did it, a lot of it with his might, with his mind, with his guts, with his competitiveness. And then he retired only to come back later when he was an executive with the Wizards. LeBron feels like he's going to try and continue to play, maybe until Bronny is potentially ready to be in the NBA, although that, it's hard for me to judge because I did see Bronny play his last high school game of the season. He barely got in. His team won the championship against Mater Dei. But, he's 14 years old. He's only going to get better, and he continues to improve in leaps and bounds. But if we would admit that LeBron is at the tail end of a magnificent career, and he has been overall the most or second most popular player throughout his run, I would say Steph Curry is the only other one that comes into comparison in his stratosphere in terms of popularity. I'm wondering if the NBA is going to, in fact, repeat itself. All right, I want you to stick with me for a second, right? Like, I'm watching Kawhi Leonard, and he dominates the game as they eliminate the Dallas Mavericks 4-2. Luka is amazing to watch. He's a tremendous player. He's just not as good at both ends as Kawhi Leonard is, even if shot making, passing, he might actually be better in those two aspects in comparison to Kawhi. But if Kawhi becomes the best player in the league and the Clippers become the best team in the league, while they're not as milquetoast as the Spurs were, with the best player being a guy who we got to drag a quote out of, there are some similarities. And then you factor in the rest of the league and how it's viewed by the mainstream public. If you look back on the 90s, the mid-90s and late 90s, when Michael Jordan retired, his last game with the Chicago Bulls was the biggest. There has not been a viewing audience as big since he retired. That was peak of popularity for the last 20 years in the NBA. But when he left, that's 30 years, I guess. When he left, there was a void. And what was it replaced by? What was it replaced by? Remember, Michael Jordan used to wear a suit and tie to every game, to every press conference. Now, after he left, guys were a lot more casual. Guys wore whatever they wanted, and it kind of spiraled out of control. David Stern stepped in, put down a dress code. He was called a racist, still is called a racist because of it, or that it has racial undertones because of it, when the truth is that the league went from the most popular professional sports league in the country to the second or maybe even third best. Remember, steroids, home run chase, baseball went through a run of being very, very popular, especially 2000 through 2004 or 5, Yankees, Red Sox, unbelievable for the sport. So basketball was at its peak with Jordan. He retires. Who was he replaced by? Well, arguably the best player in the league was Tim Duncan, who was great at both ends of the floor, who was efficient, who had no issues, who simply played and played to win and was not quotable, even if he was incredibly likable. Doesn't that sound a little bit like Kawhi Leonard? Right? And then the rest of the league and how it was viewed in terms of pushing the envelope. And if you didn't like the way in which they dressed or they acted or the things they said, you were called a racist or you're racially insensitive. It became a little bit divisive. Look, I don't think David Stern was a racist for trying to make guys more acceptable to the mainstream public, and I do think that some of our views on that have changed, right? Like you go back to 2000 and now very few people wear suit and tie to work. Very few people even wear you wear jeans with a sport coat. What is some of the most expensive shoes you can buy and that men wear are in fact sneakers. Sneakers have become very acceptable in the workplace. But instead of being viewed based upon how we dress now, sometimes now it's our political affiliation or it's just a way in which we purport ourselves in terms of what's important to us. Again, I'm not sitting here attacking NBA players for their views or their outspokenness on their views. What I'm simply telling you is, if you think all the customers take it the same way, you're wrong, which is the exact same thing as when guys were dressing in whatever gear they wanted to. Look, I was in and then out of college at the time, and the clothes they wore were the clothes that many of them I wanted to wear. But it was how it landed with middle America. And that combined with essentially a mute superstar in Tim Duncan, combined with other factors, baseball and home runs and steroids and football suddenly gaining in popularity because of fantasy football and gambling, etc. And of course, the red zone. Red zone, I think, changed football and how it's viewed forever. What, I can watch all the games and never change the channel? Yes, please. And here we are again, where basketball is not at the same level of popularity as it was back with Jordan, but still very popular. We're a week away from it competing with the NFL during their playoffs and the NFL's kickoffs to their season at the exact same time. Look, I'm not sitting here predicting gloom and doom, but if there is gloom and doom, I think you can see the parallel as to why. And that's no disrespect to Kawhi Leonard, who is magnificent, much like Tim Duncan was magnificent. Kawhi has to do a lot. He's their best player. Paul George is up and down. Something's going on there with his mental health. Lou Williams has never truly understood how to win, and so there's some flaws there, even though he's a great scorer. They don't have great interior play. Maybe that matchup hurts them against the Lakers. I can't tell you, but what I can tell you is if you ask people, hey, who's the best player in the league? One, you have to play both ends, and Luka and some of those others do not. He does. He's a tremendous scorer who's learning to be a passer. He's a great rebounder. He's your best player. But I don't know how it lands with the American public if that's the way we go.